The embroidery is already well in progress. The leaves are embroidered with DMC's MOULINE color 3051 and 319, one strand of each, with the S and Z stamp stitch. For the vein, I used the mix of running and backstitch. I stamp stitched the little branch with PERLE 5 color 869. The larkspur. I used one strand doubled of color 552. I made small perpendicular stitches on the top of the flower. And on the sides I used the S and Z stamp stitch. So on the top the little scratches, and on the sides the stamp stitch. Now the bleeding hearts. I use MOULINE color 335 and 3047, one strand of each. Again, small perpendicular stitches on the upper part of the flower, and they look like little scratches, and they progressively get longer on the sides and evolve into stamp stitch. I stamp stitched the main stems using MOULINE color 580 and 367, 3 strands of each. So cut about 1 meter of both colors and take out one strand after the other and put them together again. The embroidery will look much nicer and you'll avoid making knots. For the large leaves, I used MOULINE 471 and it's a blue 3760, one strand of each. As always, I start at the point of the leaf, the S or Z stamp stitch on the sides. When I got this, I come up in the point again, I work this little side, then I do this side. I come up at the point, do the little side, and do the opposite side again with the S or Z stamp stitch. We've seen this before. And for the vein, I used the mix of running and back stitches. The big stem, I used the color, it's brown 801, one strand doubled. On this part here, I used very small stitches snuggling against the petal, and then I worked downwards with the S and Z stamp stitch. For the peony, work perpendicular stitches all around the outer petals with MOULINE 335, one strand doubled. Do not make a satin stitch. These stitches are uneven and not very tight together. In my opinion, tight stitches will make the flower look heavy, and also it uses much more thread. Between the petals you make longer stitches. And now to fix the heart of the flower, you use MOULINE the yellow 725 and you make perpendicular stitches on both the petal and the heart. And now there's a new little stitch. It's the split back stitch. You use one strand doubled of DMC pink 335. We merge with the needle on the drawn line, and instead of going down in the same hole as you normally would if you did a regular back stitch, you stitch into the previous stitch and you emerged with the needle one stitch length ahead. And you're ready to take another stitch backwards into the previous one. That's an easy little stitch that will give you a smooth line. And when all these embroideries are done, you can start stuffing your work. Let's now embellish our flowers. I suggest you start with PISTIL stitches, a stride, the heart and the petal. You immerse the needle in the yellow heart and go down in the petal. For this, use PERLE 5 color 3046. The pistils are stitched on the upper part of the heart, and then you fill the heart with French knots, leaving the background fabric visible. So don't make too many knots. Next, you'll do the veins of the dark leaves with one strand of MOULINE 471 and 3051. The main vein is done with a backstitch or a split backstitch, and the smaller veins are done with 1 or 2 stitches. Be careful to make an acute angle between the main and the secondary veins. And you work 1 or 2 stitches. So here is an acute angle, see? And this is very important. TV antennas don't look nice. Then with PERLE 5, color 3350, you'll add a pistil to the bleeding heart. The stitch is a lazy daisy stitch. You merge the needle at the point of the flower and you form a loop. Then you go down about 1/4 inch away, the needle tip above over the thread. You pull gently, and instead of anchoring the stitch with a straight stitch, you do a French knot, wrapping the thread twice around the needle. There we go. Here you'll add a small stem stitch to attach the flower to the stem, and that's with the MOULINE 580 and 367, 3 strands of each. And you also add the last touch to the bleeding hearts, and these are little straight stitches with MOULINE 3047 and 335, 1 strand of each. You come up with the needle into the flower and you go down at the stem. Let's now do the calyx of the larkspur. This is done with 2 strands of MOULINE 580 and 1 of MOULINE 367. We merge the needle at the edge of the flower, and you go down at the tip, and you'll embroider V-shaped straight stitches of different length. And when the calyx finished, you add a small stitch to attach the calyx to the stem. And then you also add some yellow, 1 strand of MOULINE 444 and 1 of 725. You immerse the needle in the petal, and you go down between the green stitches. And you must vary the length of the stitches. You work once from right to left and then from left to right. It will be easier to get an uneven result. And now for the peony. Prepare 1 strand of MOULINE, it's pink 892, that you'll use doubled. And you will now stitch perpendicular stitches that outline the petals. You come up in the background fabric at the edge of the petal, and you stitch between the previous stitches. It's not a satin stitch again, so don't make them tight together. You'll do the same thing along the inner petal. You come up with the needle on either side of the split stitch line. I chose to let the stitches be seen, but you could come up with the needle on this side and hide it. Again, make your stitches long and short and not too tight. And all the stitches are directed towards the center of the flower. And here I also outlined the petal. So here I outlined the petal with some stem stitches. Don't do them everywhere, but sometimes you can just make one or two outlined. And to finish, for the light touch, you will embroider the little blue forget-me-nots. The stitches for the stems are free floating fly stitches and split back stitch with MOULINE green 580 2 strands and rust 919 1 strand of floss. And then I also do back stitch to join them together. And you see the stitches are quite long, maybe, well, almost 1/4 inch. Then you use PERLE 5 color 4240, and you'll stitch 4 French knots placed in a square. You come up with a needle, you wrap the thread twice, you go down, you emerge just next to it, you pull the thread tight, you make the second little knot, pulling the thread always before going down with the needle, otherwise you have a mess. So now the fourth one, and it's important that you work them in a square. And when this is done, you take three strands of MOULINE floss color 4124, or you can use 6 strands. This depends on what you want the little flowers to look like, if you want them variegated or not. And you stitch 1 French knot just in the middle of the 4 little knots. And now enjoy!